Hello, everyone. It is Thursday, January 19th, 2023. This is the weekly office hours for Cluster API provider Azure, CapZ. CapZ and Cluster API are sub-projects of SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and we're part of the CNCF, so we abide by the code of conduct. Please be kind to one another, be enthusiastic, raise your hand if you want to speak. Love to have everybody here. At the beginning of each of these discussions, we want to encourage any newcomers or really anyone for any reason to take an opportunity to introduce yourself. So I'll pause for a little bit. And if anyone would like to say hi, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Daniel, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I've been around the community a while. I think I can't remember the last time I dropped in here, but I just wanted to, see how things are going. I work for Day2IQ, and we use the Azure provider, and try to contribute here and there. Yeah, so just wanted to drop in.
Thanks for saying hi, Daniel. Welcome. Dominic, hi.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Dominic. I'm working for Giant Swarm. I'm the product owner for our CapZ Kubernetes cluster fleets. And yeah, you might have already met some of my engineering colleagues that are working together with me on the product. Francesco is, I think, already the most active from us. And I'm happy to join as well.
Welcome. Yeah, I definitely hung out with some of your fun colleagues in Detroit at KubeCon.
Very cool.
All right. I don't see any more hands, so I'll go ahead and let's start burning down the agenda here. So the first thing we want to do, I'll mention that just a preview of coming attractions. We'll do some milestone review at the end. That will be especially interesting this week because we cut 170 last week. So we've got a new milestone to sort of populate and sanitize. But the first agenda item that's been marked is Ashutosh. Anyone else, if you want to speak up and it's not here, feel free async to add an item and I'll call on you in order. Just pop it to the back of the queue here. Ashutosh, go ahead.
Yes, so this is the issue. If you can open that, Jack, this issue on screen. I'd opened like last time. This is a problem with outbound load balancer. And I have added a proposed solution on the PR. And also, synced up with CAPI folks, especially for Fabrizio on this one. And there was a question that was asked, like, what's the specific use case around Azure cluster name not equals to cluster name? And that's where, if you can see the response. So I didn't have much context on that. And that's where I thought I will ask help from Fabrizio. So it looks like we should actually fix it into CapZ and make sure that we use the load balancer name as the same of the same as cluster name. And one challenge would be to actually ensure that how do we fix it automatically for the previous existing cluster that didn't do so. But I think that should be doable by putting some logic in the reconciliation hooks where we see that, okay, this LB name is not same of Azure cluster name, and then we try to sync that up.
Cool, thank you so much. I think I understand this. I'll just restate everything you said so I understand it and maybe other folks better understand it. So essentially the cluster name in a cluster class definition becomes sort of like a prefix, and as you horizontally scale clusters from a cluster class recipe, in order to guarantee uniqueness, a little bit of a random suffix is added at the end. Right. But the load balancer by convention assumes that it's going to have the same name and it's using that prefix. Can I, just to demonstrate this more concretely for folks, because this might be helpful for, I'm going to re-share screen. Actually, I don't need to share screen. Let me go to GitHub and look at an example template. So this is our default template. Do we have,
Right.
so is the load balancer name in the spec at all? Sorry if I should already know this.
I don't think it's there, but you could just actually, if you do not opt for NAT gateway,
Yep.
CAPZ automatically provisions an outbound load balancer for us so that we have an internet connectivity.
Right. Okay. I think that makes sense. So you said there is a PR that, here we go. Is this the one?
Is this the PR? No, this is, I have not raised a PR. I'll raise
Oh, I
it.
see.
I just wanted to, like, you know, get us on the same page that we should be fixing it in CAPZ. There were a couple of questions last time from Matt and Cecile, I guess. So, you know, that's
Yeah,
where
it makes sense. In terms of back compat for existing clusters, do Azure load balancers support rename operations? Is that the idea? We do put against the load balancer resource with a new name.
I tried to edit the load balancer name on Azure cluster object, but it did not allow me. So I think one way would be to like recreate one and delete the previous one.
Yeah, so that's cool. It sounds like we have enough of a heads up that may be tricky. Go ahead, Fabrizio.
Hi, everyone. So just for my curiosity or understanding, so if I got it right, currently CAPZ make this assumption. So make this assumption that the name of the Azure cluster is equal to the name of the cluster, and then generates the name of the load balancer equal to all those two names. Okay, so if I got this right, that means that as of today, there are no Azure cluster with load balancer with name different than the Azure cluster. So really, there is no migration path. You should not care of migrating this case because this case does not exist. It does not work today.
Right, you're saying that there isn't a single actual cluster in the wild that has the pathology because it would by definition not work. And so those clusters
if I understood correctly, yeah. So this is what I'm trying to understand, because
let's look at this sample template again. So in our template, so we're using sort of customized to inject environment variables when we build these templates during our end-to-ends. And as an example here, the convention here is that the cluster and the Azure cluster are injected according to a common variable. So this will always be, in this template, this will always be the same. We have a lot of reference templates here, so I can't look at everyone, but that does make sense that we have this convention where we share that value across both the CAPI cluster definition and the CAPZ cluster definition. My question, when you said earlier, Fabrizio, that we, in the load balancer code, we compare both to the cluster and the Azure cluster, I assume we're actually not doing that. We're picking one over the other. And then in the cluster class scenario, that breaks the assumption that we had before by picking one is proven not to be durable enough to deal with the evolution of cluster class.
Yeah, because let me say, if I see this template, if you look, it is, if you look into the cluster object, there is an infrastructure ref, and in infrastructure ref there is a name, and so that name can be anything. So
right,
let me say, and so
well, it has to match this, right? It has to match the name here. These are like that's the referential link there.
Exactly. So that name can be everything. So if you want your load balancer to have the same number of the cluster, you have to pick the name of the cluster, not the name of the Azure cluster. Okay, but yeah, now sorry if I bring it up, I'm just curious to understand. So what I was trying to understand if there is actually a migration problem. Because if you change the code and you pick the cluster name instead of the Azure cluster name, I assume, looking at this template and the explanation that Ashu taught me, that all the cluster will just continue to work.
Yeah, I don't, it's not quite, everything that you're saying is not in my brain. So I don't
Yeah,
quite understand
okay.
everything. But which is fine. Cecile, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, I'm joining this conversation halfway through, so I might be missing the beginning context, but I'm assuming we're talking about the load balancer issue that Ashutosh brought up. So all the Azure resources that we create in CabZ are prefixed with or have the Azure, the Azure cluster name in it right now. So if we were to change the load balancer to be the cluster name instead of the Azure cluster name, that means we'd have this inconsistency now where like everything else has the same prefix in it except the load balancer, which might be a little weird when you look at your resource group and your resources. Have we thought about doing it the other way around and telling cloud provider, this is my cluster name and making that Azure cluster name? Because we can tell, we're telling cloud provider today like cluster name is cluster name or cluster.name.
Yeah, that was one of the things that also popped in my head, Cecile. Like, the only thing is, like, I don't know, like, does anybody know how does cloud provider Azure picks up the name of the cluster?
Yeah, there is a configuration option.
You could think of it as user configurable. So CAPZ in this case is applying that configuration on behalf of the user automatically.
Yeah.
Does it come through? Like, can you tell me where does that config go through? Like, what's the point of ingestion from cloud provider Azure perspective?
So it depends if you're using in tree or out of tree. For out of tree, it's a Helm chart value. So you can set it in the Helm when you're doing Helm install, and we do set it today. I believe for in tree, it's a flag.
In Kuberium config?
In the Cloud Controller Manager.
I think we should probably time box this. I'm super glad you brought this up, Ashutosh. But it sounds like we have multiple ways we could go, and we want to get to all the agenda items. Is that okay with you, Ashutosh? And other folks? Cecile, is that okay with you? Okay, cool. And you have another agenda item, Ashutosh. I'll just keep the mic.
I mean, I have the next one. So just to end on this one, Jack, like, so Cecile, let's we can actually comment on issue and then we'll take it from there. So second one is like the failures that I am seeing in cloud provider Azure while trying to test workload identity. So the failure is when I create I have a like POC PR for workload identity that just makes a couple of changes and sets up the prerequisites, for example, generating the keys and deploying workload identity webhook. When I create a cluster using my current PR branch and not use workload identity, it just goes fine. But when I do create a cluster and I change the type of Azure cluster identity to workload identity, cloud provider Azure just crashes. And this was one issue with in-tree provider. So I switched to, so I thought I'll use external cloud provider, and external cloud provider is anyway crashing. Like whenever I deploy onto the workload cluster, the external cloud provider is crashing. So these are the two things that I've captured in a Google document with me. Do you mind if I share my screen, Jack? Like,
I don't mind. Do you need me to claim or grant you host? Or do you have the key?
Let me pull the document.
I think since you've already claimed it, Jack, you need to share co-host.
I wonder if I've ever done that. Advanced sharing
Participants.
options.
You go in participants and then you click next to Ashutosh's name, more, make
Oh,
co-host.
more. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm on Zoom, you can do it.
I can still not see. Oh, yeah.
So it sounds
have
like
to
Ashutosh,
stop.
you're stuck on just functionally making this work at all.
Yes, because I'm not able to test my PR because of that. So the only thing that I want to test right now, the last thing is, when I create a workload cluster from the kind cluster, that workload cluster is actually what gets converted to management cluster in a lot of user setup. So I just want to transfer that identity to the workload cluster and then test that. Now this workload cluster is able to do the API authentication with Azure.
That's fair. It does seem like that's sort of like run, crawl, run, walk, crawl instead of crawl, walk, run. It seems like that's the more complicated scenario.
I think that's the usual, right? Like mostly people will not have their management cluster on kind cluster.
It's not that maybe that's certainly going to be true in production, but I'm not sure if we have the data to suggest whether most folks use self-managed CAPI clusters versus having a dedicated management cluster. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. I was just making an observation. Go ahead, Cecile.
Yeah, just I guess this applies to the issue we were talking about previously too, but for this one as well. Since we have kind of the in-tree cloud provider and out-of-tree cloud provider scenarios side by side right now, I think it might make sense to just focus on out-of-tree for now, because we are planning to switch like all the templates, all the reference templates and all the tests to out-of-tree by the next release. There's an issue for that, and I've assigned myself planning on working on it like this week or next week. So I think it might make sense to just focus on out-of-tree as the only workload identity scenario going forward, since those two will get released together.
Awesome. Yeah, let me just quickly. So what screen can you see? Oh, you see a different screen. Let me share. Why am not right? What are you seeing from my screen? Are you seeing a ZR or are you seeing?
We're seeing a
ZR?
close-up of a like a PNG image.
What?
The URL of.
Hold on. So Jack, I think I'll paste the link of the doc. Can you please share and open the doc for me?
Fair
a
enough.
lot of windows here.
Absolutely happy to.
I've pasted that in that chat.
Yep. Cool. All right.
So
Okay.
if you scroll down to test 3, yeah. So if you see, these are the things that I did. Step 1 is the normal make tilt up, and this is on my branch with just that has workload identity changes, and I'm able to create a workload cluster using workload identity. And step 2 is when the workload cluster is created, I just wanted to deploy a external cloud provider. And when I do that, I see that the cloud provider is still crashing here. So it just crashes.
Am I the only one that's a little bit uncertain what this means, the using workload identity part of the sentence? Go ahead, Cecile.
No, please, Ashutosh, go ahead.
Yeah, so using workload identity means I am not using the current existing supported way of identity. And we have an Azure cluster identity object. And in my PR, I have made a change that Yeah, this is not yet supported. This is work in progress, and I've made a change that actually takes one more value in Azure Cluster Identity Object spec.type, that is workload identity. So when you do that, CapZ automatically switches to use workload identity workflow in the code. That's currently WIP. That's not in main. That's not in any release version. So the cluster gets created fine. Authentication works. I have a full-fledged workload cluster deployed on Azure Infra. But whenever I do like a Helm install of cloud provider Azure, it just crashes.
Right.
And it just crashes even for non-workload identity based tests. So I think there's something wrong with like cloud provider Azure, or there's some configuration that I'm missing.
Cool. Have you dug into the stack trace? Like, do we know what's going on at these references?
Yesterday I couldn't, like, that's the plan. Like, I just brought it up. So it got late for me trying to, observe this.
Totally
So
understood.
this is the next step.
Go ahead, Cecile.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to like look at this all together in office hours. And I don't want to, hold
Sure.
else, but I really want to help you get unblocked. So would it help if like maybe either if we finish, or if we're able to finish early, we stay on and the last part of office hours to pair on this, or maybe I can get up earlier tomorrow morning and try to sync with you on your hours.
I can spend some time after this call. That's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Whatever works. Because I think it'd be easier if we just dig in and just try to repro it together.
Sure.
And to be fair, I explicitly invited Ashutosh to share this during office hours. So.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I think it's just looking at this now, there's nothing that comes to mind that's obvious. I mean, unless anyone else is looking at this and going, oh, this is because of this issue.
Yeah.
I think all of us are just not seeing a pattern here.
Yeah. Just to wrap up, so this is where I'm at, and I'll just take one more minute. So one progress that I made in workload identity was, like, thanks to Fabrizio, he gave a good suggestion on to how to use the secret. So there was a challenge in terms of distributing the key pairs to control pin nodes. So that is solved, and I validated that. So that's all good. So once I get unblocked with this cloud provider Azure crashing, I think the next step would be to just test a migration, like, or have a migration workflow, and then we are good with the PR. So yeah, that's just wanted to say that. Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for working on these work streams, Ashutosh. Okay, cool. So I guess I've got the next two agenda items. They're sort of related. The first one is just a brief announcement that the AKS graduation from experimental is now live. So that's great. We're going to be testing that in this development cycle, and we'll ship the changes with 1.8.0. So thanks to everybody who supported that effort. It's been a months-long, years-long journey. That's really great news. I want to clarify that the live and man, what this means in practice is does not actually amount to any functional changes. It's just a sort of rearranging of a couple main things, rearranging of the source code so that the API definitions and various controller runtimes are not in the experimental part of the way we organize our source. And then the second important thing is that the feature flag that is normally required now in 1.7 and versions below that, the feature flag to turn this on is no longer required. It's locked to true, which means following the sort of upstream Kubernetes conventions, you actually can't disable the feature flag. It's essentially there as a sort of vestigial thing that will wait for releases to formally deprecate. Any questions on any of that? Okay, cool. And then I wanted to mention and give some room for folks to share any concerns with PR end-to-end test flakes. If you want to vent, now's a time when you have lots of sympathetic voices. It's been, I think, fairly challenging the last few days for me, at least. concretely, I can say one of the reasons is because the AKS end-to-end test is now required, and there are still some flakes there. So I will be, excuse me, I'll be prioritizing with any other folks who want to work on that, addressing those. So apologies in advance if your PRs take a few more retests to get to main after approval. And in addition, there is another very particular annoying flake that I see, at least in the end-to-end, the standard end-to-end test for multiple control plane nodes, where the test suite times out waiting for cluster deletion. So I'm actively debugging that in my laptop right now in the background. Go ahead, Cecile.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick also shout out to Jonathan for bringing back some cluster API template goodness into CAPZ as well for flaky tests reports. And I think we should really try to use that going forward once it merges. Whenever we see like a failing test, I think that will help us have a better, clearer idea of what's going on with flakes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
plus one.
for
Go ahead.
sure.
Oh yeah, Jonathan, go ahead.
To add on to that, we were, at least within our team, we were also looking into finding some way to try to automate tracking test grid failures in CAPZ. So if we come up with a solution for that, we could also share that with other providers as well.
Yeah, so I would definitely encourage anybody suffering through this to reach out in Slack, file an issue, bug us. It's something that we care about. We don't enjoy inflicting pain on our community. Go ahead, Fabrizio.
Yeah, just as many of you are aware, in main CAPI there is a release team, and in the release team there is also a CI and signal person, and they are looking at the same family of problem. How do we track failures? How do we figure it out? Failure from flake, etc., etc. If you're, please reach out to them. Maybe they already have some idea on the table.
Yep, great call out. I think that we will learn from this. It's a relatively new effort, and so I think CAPZ will watch closely what's going on there and potentially self-form a similar team with our community. All right. Going once, going twice, going three times for any more test flake observations, commentary. Okay, so we are at the milestone review part of the office hours. I'll set expectations. This might take a while because this is the first milestone review for 1.8. So if you feel like this is too low level and you have other things to work on, you will be forgiven for dropping early. But for folks who are actively looking to do work on this milestone, this is where you want to be. Dominic?
Yeah, I still would have a topic for today, at least to shortly talk about. I couldn't add it onto the
Go ahead.
onto the agenda because I don't have any rights on it yet. So we are currently looking at machine pools, especially in discussion with machine deployments. We tried out machine pools because we think that machine pools in general is the better approach, since it leads to a bit more independence of the working cluster compared to the management cluster. So that's really like a good thing that we want. But on the other side, we run into a lot of problems with machine pools. So I at least wanted to, check out with the community overall. Is there any like commitments to machine pools? Or is it more like, we have it, but, whoever wants to work on that?
Okay, I'm multitasking to my maximum. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, so as far as machine pools go, there's been a proposal a while back that merged for adding machine pool machines. So the point of that is it would be a CAPI PR that allows machine pools to provision machines so that you can interact with the individual instances for a cloud provider that supports it. and it would also be able to work with cluster autoscaler. So that proposal has merged, and I'm currently working on the implementation right now. I have a PR open that's WIP. And once that is close to merging, I'll circle back and implement that in Azure as well. So I guess to answer your question, there's a commitment and it is currently in progress.
Awesome. Yeah, we already also created 2 pull requests for issues that we found and that we could directly work on. We have to do one step back now, go again with machine deployments, just to onboard customers a bit faster because those issues are currently blocking us. But we want to help to get machine pools in the right track. So if you need any help there, we'll sure in a few weeks definitely come back to that issue.
Cecile?
Yeah, what Jonathan said is exactly right. And then also one other data point is the the managed cluster AKS graduation that just happened. That has a dependency on machine pools. So it's in our best interest to graduate that also and keep that stable long term. So just to if that helps, machine pools are also being used by managed clusters. So that's a big part there. But that being said, I think machine deployments do solve a lot of the problems that cloud providers are trying to solve with machine pools like VMSS and Azure. So it is worth, if you're using self-managed clusters, considering machine deployments as an alternative and seeing what in VMSS or machine pools is it that you want and whether machine deployment solves that or not. Because they're essentially very similar. It's just that machine deployments, the orchestration of the instances is done by Cluster API, and so it's shared amongst other CAPI infra providers, whereas the machine pools, the orchestration of the instances is delegated to the cloud provider. So for example, in the case of Azure VMSS is the one that orchestrates the instances for things like rolling upgrades and high availability, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly that, that we can delegate that responsibility. And with that, if the management cluster breaks, the workload clusters can still scale. It's definitely a very good selling point. And that AKS is using it, I think is the maximum commitment we can get there. So yeah, thanks for that information.
Can you paste a link to some of the bugs that you've encountered that you've filed so far?
Yeah, sure. I can directly add
in chat. Maybe if you do it in chat, I'm happy to copy paste it over just so we have a record of.
Yeah, I can add those 2 issues that we already have created.
Great, I see some, so I'll just go ahead and click through. I mean, maybe does anybody have any? If you have any knowledge of where these issues are, feel free to speak up. I don't have anything to say about that particular one. So I'm going to add these for the record. Thank you very much. All right, so I could speak to this one a little bit. This has probably a lot to do with the configurable flexibility of VMSS and Azure. So updating updating one part of the VMSS configuration is going to, you have lots of options in terms of how you're going to roll that, just similar to sort of Cluster API as well. So we could probably work toward sort of outlining the various configuration options for VMSS and seeing if we have all those exposed to CAPC users. Because it's possible that the current configuration is a limited set of what VMSS offers. For example, update the recipe, what we call the model in VMSS, but not actually apply that across existing VMs in that VMSS. That's a slightly more complicated thing to do in coordination with the Kubernetes node abstraction layer. Go ahead, Cecile.
I'm sorry, please finish your thought. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay. I think that's my finishing. I think that what I'm trying to say TLDR is that there's some functional work that we need to do to unlock configuration between CAPZ and VMSS that hasn't been done yet. That's it.
I was gonna say, while we're here, do you think it'd be worth adding this to the milestone, at least to triage? Because if it is actually a bug where this isn't working as expected, I think it's pretty high priority.
Just added both to the milestone. And that's a nice segue. Thank you. I can actually click through, I think, here. Okay, cool. So I'll pause for a few more seconds and then we'll go do the thing where we, like a piece of music that says, go up to a different part of the music. We're going to go here. All right. Excuse me. So we have already closed 24 items. That's sort of surprising, I guess. I'm not going to drill through. We got limited time, but we've got 22 here. So let's maybe PRs first, issues first. Let's do PRs first. I think this is lowest hanging fruit, just to make sure that our there aren't any old PRs that we need to maybe consider bumping. So by default, this is a brand new milestone. We've got almost 2 months in our development cycle. So you would imagine that all these PRs are going to be a part of the milestone, but it would make sense from a planning perspective to add these ahead of time, I think, and also as an exercise of seeing if there's anything we want to drop. So the oldest PR we have here looks like this one, and it is skip system pool validation while cluster pause. It's not milestone tagged. Is there any reason why we shouldn't tag this for milestone 1.8? Go ahead, Cecile.
We should absolutely tag this. I think, in fact, I think we already put the issue in the milestone. I don't know whether this PR as is going to merge because it's been a while and it's kind of stale at this point, but I think we want to solve the issue that this is targeting, just because that's a known bug in managed clusters and we're graduating managed clusters. So that was one of the things discussed in the issue.
Okay, cool. Well, I added it to 1.8. I think that it'll at least get more of our attention if it's in that milestone, because I'm not sure folks are actually looking at the next milestone. All right, here's another one that's in next. So by default, I'll add it to 1.8 unless we have an objection. Is there a reason why we shouldn't merge? We shouldn't tag draft PRs in a concrete milestone? Let's go ahead and add it. And this is already tagged. So this one, I feel like, Cecile, you and I had a conversation. Let's just go ahead and close it. You seem to have a decent plan for incorporating this into a different spike. We can talk about this offline too.
Yeah. Because I thought you said you were going to get it working. So
I haven't looked into it, so it failed now.
Okay. Either way,
I'm sensing that we can add it to the milestone. I'm super happy to look into it. It's an older PR, so I think it was one of those things that I assumed would be easy, and I ran the test, and the test told me, nope, it's not going to be easy. So it needs a little bit more attention. Okay, this is in the milestone. So Ashtosh, I assume this is your PR, so I'll go ahead and add this to 1.8. Thank you so much. Okay. I think I don't have consensus on this, so I might just close this. Does anybody think that they're...
What do you mean you don't have consensus? I thought it was approved.
Oh, sorry, I'm confused with another PR.
I think this was just waiting for tests passing.
It is. Whoops. Didn't tabs. Okay, so I was actually here. Sorry. Okay. I am confident that this should be in the milestone. This is something that Nawaz is working on. Thank you so much. Let's see. This doesn't have a milestone tag. If Willie is here, is there any reason not to put this in the milestone? I'm just going to go ahead and do it unless you tell me not to.
No, this should be in the milestone.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to do the same for this, unless John tells me not to. And this, I mean, I think we could probably, for these depend about PRs, rely on the automation, but since I'm looking at it, I'll go ahead and do that. Oops.
Hey, Jack, small trick. If you don't want to click on the PR every time, you can just click the checkbox and change the milestone from this page.
Oh, okay, well, that would be so much easier. Why would I do that? You're saying I can like do this. Okay, assuming these are not, can I do this? Assign,
Yeah, this one.
no. Oh, milestone, yep. Let me quickly see if any of these are controversial. I think this all seems fine. All right, great. So do we want to go into the issue queue and burn those down? Actually, let me really quickly go to milestone V next. Why can't I? Cecile, go ahead.
I feel like we already have a lot in 1.8, like almost too much already. So if we're gonna add more stuff from vNext, maybe we should kick stuff out that's in there. Or maybe
Cool.
how we feel about the current state of it.
That's a good point. So maybe the lowest hanging fruit at this point is to just quickly spot check and identify if any of this is out of scope for 1.8. So I'll quickly go down the list, and I think I'll just rely on folks to unmute and add some clarifying instructions. So we'll make an exception for the raise hand rule here. So if you see anything interesting here, please feel free to interrupt, because it's just too hard for me to do all that at the same time. So CAPC should use out-of-tree controller manager and storage drivers. This is assigned to Justin. It is a 2.5-year-old issue. Go ahead, Cecile.
It's assigned to me. Justin created the issue.
Oh, so got it.
Yeah,
Cool.
this one we want to do this. The first two go hand in hand together. This is basically switching all our reference and test templates to out of tree. I think we
Awesome.
want to do that. Justification is that it's going to be unsupported, or entry is going to be unsupported in 1.27.
Cool.
Yeah, and I would also argue that then we're actually testing the out of tree cloud provider, which we should.
We are testing it right now, but we're not testing it in every scenario because our default is entry. So the out of tree ones are more restricted. But yeah, we should test it with everything.
Yep. And to be clear, the Cloud Provider Azure project itself, which is natively out of tree, if you pardon the weird language there, uses CAPC. So we do have, I think our functional test for out of tree and CAPC is rock solid. It's more across the feature matrix in CAPC. We don't have that fully across the finish line yet. Okay, so I don't see Matt here, but I am pretty sure that there's only a single PR that's needed to address this, and it's already almost across the finish line. Is that a controversial statement?
It's not exactly as simple as that. That first PR is part of it, but then there's more to do that is a little more complex regarding like futures and polars and stuff like that. But he's working on that.
Do we feel like 1.8 is too aggressive for that? Because it's a lot of change if it's more than just that one PR.
No, I think it's I think that's, I would say that and out of tree are also our top two things that we should focus on because of the timeline of it. Since auto-rest will be unsupported starting April. And this is due March, so it doesn't give us much margin afterwards.
I have no idea why my browser refreshed this page. Maybe.
Yeah, and the other thing too is there's kind of a backlog of things that we can't do for features. Like we already have one, like service health can't be done. There's
Got it.
others where the current Go SDK and such is just not gonna let us move forward.
Cool. Ashutosh?
Just a question, when is the like release date for the 1.8? Like,
That's a great
what's the
question.
date?
So the target date is March 7th.
Oh, okay. I could see on the screen. Thanks.
Okay, I feel like Ashutosh, hopefully you could speak to
Yeah,
this, but
I
it
think-
sounds like we're on the same page that this is the target is for this to land before 1.8.
Yeah, it's to definitely make it as soon as possible, and I'm like trying my best to get it like into CAPZ, just that hitting a couple of roadblocks, but like we are making progress, so I'm positive that it will make in 1.8. Yeah.
Great. Okay, cool. I know that there's a PR for this, so I think that's safe to keep in the
Yes,
milestone. Go ahead.
One, just that, there is one last part of the thing that I just want to test on my PR and then update the design document, and then I'll ask for a final review. So, that's the plan. So I think we have like removed the blockers, other blockers. So this is the last one, I think. So
You're speaking to
it'll-
this PR 2814 here.
that's the proposal PR. Yeah, and then there is a I want to update like the migration workflow and some recent feedback that I got from Fabrizio. So that's a big good, but I'll just test it and then update.
Okay, cool. Great, thank you so much. So moving down the list, there's a couple of AKS end-to-end tests. I think these are issues. Yeah, these are issues at Circle. This is the sort of epic issue. I feel comfortable keeping these in the milestone. Just one opinion. Feel free to disagree if you disagree. I think that this is in progress, so we'll keep that in the milestone. Again, please interrupt me if there's anything controversial that I'm saying by executive decision. Go ahead, Ashutosh.
So this PR 2836, it's fine if it makes into does this have any milestone assigned? This is 1.8, right?
Everything we're looking at here is the 1.8 milestone.
Yeah. Okay.
So the objective here is to identify things that we think actually should not be prioritized for 1.8 and kick it out and put it into vNext instead.
Yeah, I don't have any objection. So if it makes it, it's fine. Only thing is there was some issue with testing MEC on CAPZ. I have not recently looked into it. I had reviewed that PR sometime back. Do anyone have any context on that?
I feel like I've seen Cecile review that PR several times. So I think it's actively inching forward.
Yeah, I did add some comments on it yesterday, and put it on hold because there are 19 commits. But yeah, waiting to hear back from the author.
Awesome.
Okay, I know the flat car template is almost ready, so I'm going to keep that here. I'm going to vote for that. Willie, I think that this is moving forward. So is it reasonable to assume this will ship in 1.8? Cool, I'm seeing a nodding head.
Yep.
This hopefully will land this week, this PR from Matt. I think this one is basically ready from John. So when I say that, that's shorthand for me, including it in the, sorry, Cecile, I'm not doing any kicking out here, so doing a bad job. This,
It's okay, we just can't add more.
this seems like this is the North Star of the auto rest stuff, right?
That's the SDK part, yes.
Yeah,
That's the SDK.
I assume this is the hard part.
Yes. Ashutosh, are you raising your hand or is that from before?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, since we included this in this milestone, and this is a part of that. We probably need to include both or kick both out. Feel like we should not do that. Matt not here. I know he's actively working on it. So, all right. Let's be confident we can help Ashutosh move this forward in the 1.8 milestone about the load balancer cluster class bug. Have you made any progress on this, Ashutosh? Sorry.
Yeah, just that I was able to isolate that it does not have anything to do with AAD pod identity, and it just occurs with workload identity too. And I think it has to do something with Azure API. So I have like no tools now to like kind of, go much deeper into that. So either like somebody who has wider access or idea on how to like nail it down, or just we use the, like you said, Jack, eventual consistent practices to.
Right. This is the first thing I'm hearing that might be appropriate to kick to V next. We can always move it back in if
Yes.
Are there any objections to that?
No, no objection. I don't see any action item on CAPZ specifically for this one. Just a good to know thing.
Okay, cool. So we've got 5 minutes left, so we might not get through this, but we've definitely made some progress, and we'll do this next week and asynchronously between meetings as well. Where was I? Did it reorder things?
The metric server add-on image, that one's a quick one, but we just need to do that because it's still in gcr.io. It shouldn't be.
Got it. Cool. I'll keep that in. This is.
That's the one we talked about earlier. That's
Right.
the bug for managed clusters.
Got it. Cool. Let's keep that in because it sounds, if it's probably just an easy fix, and it sounds like a really annoying thing. This, I think, is definitely 1.8. I've assigned that to myself. I know that Francesco isn't here, so I don't want to necessarily kick this out, but this doesn't seem like a trivial work stream, so I might kick this out.
That's the one we just added when we were looking at the issues dominating listing.
Right, great.
Yeah, there's a lot in here. I think it's, yeah. Everything else is still, so that's good.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
I agree. We shouldn't be adding more things, or we need to probably go to the next, and at some point, maybe not right now in our 3 minutes, but to see if there's really anything that prompts anything that's here. Because all the stuff that I think is in 1.8 it's all really important, good stuff. It's just it's a priority thing, I think.
Yep. I mean, to be clear, we're near the beginning of the development cycle, and so as a community, we can decide on what side of the spectrum we want this process to sort of target. Do we want to target accuracy at the end of the milestone, or do we want to target sort of maximum opportunity for folks in the community to contribute? And so for folks who are landing and saying, what's been sort of approved for immediate forward progress, do those alternative spectrum ends make sense to folks? Like the downside of having more than we can finish is that at the end of the milestone, we have a bunch of stuff that we didn't finish. I'm not sure if that's a bad thing. Go ahead, Cecile.
To me, the issue queue is what's there for people to go and find work. The milestone, I see it more as a way to give high fidelity prediction to our users of what is going to be in the next release, like what they can expect to see. I don't really see it as a way for people to pick up work, because we tend to put stuff in there once it's assigned or once there's already a PR. So apart from a few issues in here, most things are already being worked on. So it's hard for someone to come in and say, okay, what can I pick up? So yeah, that's just my personal.
That sounds like a perfectly convincing counter argument to what I said. Go ahead, David. T.
Yeah, I was just going to echo. I don't think it matters as much if we don't hit everything that's on here, but I do think that we should try to be somewhat realistic within the capacity of the community at large with what we can try and do. And I also would just say, since we're, obviously we're here on the community call, and anyone who feels otherwise, like such and such issue or whatever else should be in the milestone, then, please let us know. But obviously amongst ourselves here and Microsoft contributors, we only have so much capacity to give. So yeah. But
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's just worth disclaiming now that we're on recording for all time that, I mean, as demonstrated by myself in the last 20 minutes or so, our milestone approval process is very ad hoc. And so to the extent that you want interfaces like this to accurately allow your user community to plan ahead for, say, adoption of 1.8, someone wants to look on this and say, okay, I need that feature. That feature's on the milestone. That means I can actually confidently plan that in March, I will be adopting 1.8 and rolling it out to my environment. So I think we don't have the sufficiently robust milestone approval process to achieve that, if that's one of our goals. So I think it's just worth being honest about that. I know in lots of Kubernetes,
I think it's something to
SIGs
strive for. I mean, I definitely think it's something to strive for, but unless I'm reading or hearing something otherwise, I don't think we're, going to penalize us if we don't make one of the things that's there. I think we need to try and operate with honest intentions, but that's part of why we have the weekly meetings to adjust. Like if we think like something's at risk of not making it, then we need to communicate that to the community at large. And, that's an opportunity as well for someone else to step up.
Cool. That sounds great. There's lots of SIGs out there that have lots of very robust milestone approval processes. So I'm not sure we actually want to go down that path, but it does have the advantages of producing more high fidelity accuracy in terms of what actually ships. But it's non-trivial work to do that.
Yep.
Great. We are 1 minute over. That means we had a lot of great discussion. Thank you everybody for coming. I'll upload the recording, paste it to the doc. See folks online and next week.
Thanks.